I'm Bae.
And I'm Morgan, and we are the Body Acceptance Babes.
This is the podcast where we talk about how to accept the body you have, let go of societal expectations to change the way you look, and to just be who you were born to be from the inside out.
You'll hear about how we embrace body neutrality, reject diet culture, and learn how you can too. Now on with the show. Hey, Bae.
Hi, Morgan. How are you?
Good. How are you?
So good. Excited for
excited?
episode 7.
Yay. I was just going to ask, are you excited to talk about the diet voice?
I mean, not super excited because, like,
It's
that
horrible.
voice can take a hike.
Exactly.
But I am excited to share with our listeners and help them through their own diet voices.
That's absolutely true. That's why we do this and why we're here. Yeah, so.
Has anything come up for you this week in the body acceptance world?
I guess I'll share a little mini story. So we just got cameras put around our house, and naturally they're just like put in corners, and we have 3 of them around our house. And I have an app on my phone where I can look at the footage, and occasionally it catches me on the camera because obviously I go in and out of my house, and I have a life. And some of the angles of these cameras, I'm like, whoa, and then I have to remind myself that like no one is looking at me from 20 feet in the air, and maybe not 20 feet, maybe 10 feet in the air, and from behind or like something stupid, and that it's you know, kind of silly for me to be, not silly, but because I want to validate my feelings, but it's kind of, I don't need to be worried about it, basically. Right? And no one's gonna see these. No, and also no one's gonna see these camera images but me, unless I break into my own house. No, I'm kidding.
Plus, you should feel comfortable walking around your house.
Exactly. So I'm starting. Yes. So I'm trying to. I guess what's the term? I'm trying to work through this journey, this part of the journey. Yeah.
Plus the camera quality is probably shit.
Oh, it's horrible.
Like,
yeah.
And the lens probably distorts everything. Cause,
Yeah. And it gets, if it's wet, it gets blurry. And if it's, for sure. It's not perfect by any means. It's better than not having a camera. I kind of like having cameras because when I'm home alone, it makes me feel comfortable. But
safer.
Absolutely. But so that's kind of, but seeing yourself from really awful, weird angles is when you're going through a body acceptance journey. Yeah. So I'm on the road to feel neutral about it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's
and how are you going to get to neutrality?
I think get used to seeing them, and every time I see them and I have a strong feeling about them, reminding myself some of the things we talked about in the previous episode of body dysmorphia related, like, you know, that these images are from weird angles. They're not necessarily, like, even just some of the stuff we just said, like the camera's distorted, the camera image isn't clear, you know, and just reminding myself that no one is going to see me from that angle ever. So, so it's not like an angle I need to worry about, because I'm all about, I know photography and I know what angles make me look like I feel comfortable and what angles don't. So, you know, but yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, it's almost like I shouldn't expect myself to look good in every angle of every, you know, not good, but like look a certain way. I have to let go of that expectation. Like on really crappy footage, I'm not gonna look like a movie star.
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, just be realistic about that.
Yeah. Especially too, if you're walking around outside your house, you might be like in your pajamas or like, you know.
Often I am in pajamas. Yeah. Or not wearing a bra or whatever. Yeah. Or not showered, or, you know, just woken up and my hair is crazy and I'm just going to take out the garbage or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're not at your best, and you're not like, you know, you're not. Sure. But I acknowledge that, because I think it's important, like, as we talk about this stuff and even the diet voice, I think this is going to come up in this episode too. It's like, we're not experts in the sense that we aren't we're not finished with our journeys. Like, we're still on our journeys, and I don't think you can ever finish your journey anyway, but like,
No.
I don't consider myself an expert. I just share what I'm going through, and I'm still in the thick of it. Like, I've come a long way, but I have far to go too. So
Yeah.
and I think that's okay, because
Absolutely.
we get to meet people where we're at.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
yeah, so I'm not perfect, and that's okay. I still have things that trigger me. But
Nobody's perfect.
no. But I'm much better. Instead of seeing those images and starving myself all day, I don't do that anymore.
Yay!
So like that's an example of when I say I've come so far, right?
Yeah.
Is I actively work through developing body neutrality in these moments, and work through not engaging in eating disorder behavior, and there we go.
Yes.
So yeah. So what about you? Anything come up this week at all?
I've been watching a lot of old movies because they've been reruns on TV. Like, not that I've been seeking them out.
How old?
Yeah, I don't watch black and whites.
Okay.
Old like us growing up. So like,
okay.
Hook was on
I have a
TV.
husband who loves black and white movies. So and movies where they don't speak. So like, what are they called? Silent movies.
Yeah.
So when you mean old movies, you mean like 20 years old. Got it.
Yeah. Old for me, and like, I typically don't watch anything before 85. And old for me is like early 2000s, between 85 and early 2000s. So like, Hook was on TV, Space Jam was on TV. I mentioned last episode.
Jam.
I know. Mean Girls was on TV.
Yep.
Josie and the Pussycats was on TV. So I'm watching all these, and I noticed in multiple situations that characters were being made fun of for being fat. And I found it triggering. My diet voice came up, like, oh my gosh, I look in my messed up body dysmorphia mind that I look bigger than that character, therefore I would also be teased, therefore I should do something about it. And it made me so sad for my childhood self, having grown up watching these, looking up to these characters in an environment where I was always being teased for being fat. So it's like so triggering to see them. And like you, I have come far, but that diet voice is always there.
Yeah.
And it always, like, when I see stuff like that, it sent me down a path of like, okay, so this is what I'm going to do. Like, I'm going to start exercising. These are the exercises I could do. This is the stuff I could do. And it all comes from a place of like, in order to lose weight, in order to not be teased. Not from a, I'm invaluable to society at this size.
Do you think, and I'm going to bring this up because I think it's something we could talk about how far society's come, or whether we think it's come at all. Do you think that weight stigma and, like, I guess for lack of a better phrase, fat people being teased still happens in movies now? Or do you think it happens less in movies now? And it happened more in movies when we were younger. Like, what's your perception of that? Because I almost feel like it was more prevalent when we were younger than it is now. But maybe I just have an adult perspective on it. I don't know.
So I mean, I still watch kids movies. Like, I would consider. I mean, I don't know if Mean Girls and Josie and the Pussycats are considered kids movies, but like, Hook is definitely a kids movie, and like Space Jam is definitely a kids movie, and like, I definitely I watched Clifford the Big Red Dog like the other day. Like, I still watch kids movies. I was watching Hook, and they literally were like chanting, "You're old and fat. You need to lose weight," because they're trying to get him in shape to be Peter Pan and go against Hook to save his children. Right. Yeah, but they're literally chanting it, and like and they told him he was fat, and then
I completely forgot about that part. Maybe I blocked it out of my mind because it was too dramatic or something. Right? But,
yeah. But it's a different perspective too when you watch these again, old movies. Now you look at them and you're like, oh, I actually like thought this was normal and acceptable and okay as a child, whereas as an adult now in this society, I'm like, oh, that is not okay.
Yeah. So do we think in movies, I mean, I think that wouldn't be okay in a movie nowadays, but I feel like, do we think in movies, I guess we think that things are improving but not fully there.
Well, because I'm rewatching Big Bang Theory, which is kind of recent, like in the last 5 years. And I definitely saw like there's a shift where like people aren't being teased for being fat, but Bernadette was upset that that she's pregnant and that she's gonna get fat. And then she just made some comment to Penny about, well, she's skinny. And then Penny's like, oh, I just heard skinny. And it's like still praised to be skinny, even though like it's looked down on to be fat. So it's still there.
Which I have such a problem with women who are pregnant, like being called fat too, because they're not fat, they're pregnant.
Yeah.
And I think that's a different, I mean, even I don't like the word fat in any context, but like it's like if Bernadette were to say that to me, I'd be like, no, you're not fat, you're not going to get fat, you're going to get pregnant.
Yeah.
More pregnant, you know what I mean? Like
exactly.
You're growing a human, it's different, you know? So and I guess it's the whole mentality that our bodies aren't allowed to change as we get older and as we go through things, and you know what I mean, like but I get what you're saying. It's like the message was still there, but it was just hidden a little bit, and it wasn't as loud and clear as in the older movies. I find in Friends when they discuss when Monica used to be in a bigger body, that triggers me often, and to the point where I don't really watch Friends anymore. Like I can't do it. So I totally get those experiences. But so what do we think about this? So when we hear these things, it triggers like the diet voice. So like let's talk about what the diet voice is and like where does it come from and all of that. So do you want to discuss for you?
Sure.
Because I think it can be individual too.
Absolutely. So for me, movies and TV and media has always been a big part of my life growing up.
Yes.
Yeah. So I feel like my diet voice is shaped a lot by what I saw in the media. So my voice comes from a place of, you don't want to be fat because you'll get teased, and you don't want to be fat because it's not socially acceptable. So do whatever you can to fly under the radar so that nobody comments on your body.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's different from me because I didn't grow up with the same experience. So from me, I would say my voice probably came more from family, like the Aunt Marges of the world, and Aunt Marge is who we use as a generic family member who makes comments.
Yes.
Aunt Marge can be your mother, your father, your aunt, your uncle, your brother, your sister.
Yeah.
But we just use Aunt Marge as a way to not. Yeah, so
she's our token scapegoat.
Yeah, she's our token scapegoat. So yeah, the Aunt Marges of the world making comments growing up, and and just it's that feeling of I'm not worthy unless I'm thin, and that's what I think fuels the voice for me the most. I tend to call it my eating disorder voice because I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, but I like that we're calling it the diet voice because it is inclusive to everyone by calling it that, I think. So if I switch back and forth, I'm sorry, but it's just something I'm used to saying. But that's definitely where my diet voice came from, is from family members, and just that like, oh, I'm not worthy of love unless I look a certain way. So I better do that.
Mine definitely is the same. I'm not worthy of love unless I look a certain way. I mentioned this in a previous episode too, but like I always said to myself, I will not meet the person that I meant to spend the rest of my life with until I'm done losing weight. And that comes from the diet voice
Yeah, that you're not worthy of love in a long-term relationship unless you look a certain way.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is totally not true. Which is kind of silly that, like, because I had that same thought too.
Yeah.
But now that I think about all the people that are together that I know in my life, and how many of them are in bigger bodies and smaller bodies, and one of each and whatever, it's like, it's kind of like, I'm like, why did I think that?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, but that's, why did I think that? It's social conditioning and the diet voice and all of that, right? So so that's, I guess, where our own personal diet voices come. But I feel like we could talk about, like, it comes from the media, it comes from family members, like, these are just possibilities for listeners, right? It comes from maybe your partner, it comes from the medical community.
The medical community, the people who spread diets by saying like, you can't have fats, or you can't have carbs, or you
the
can't
weight loss
have...
industry, the fitness industry, social media, like, it can come from all those places, and what I find that it comes externally, and then we internalize the external messages, and then that's where the voice comes from, for me anyway.
And I feel like a good way to describe the diet voice is that it's that other voice in your head that feels outside of you, that's telling you that you need to change the way you look in life, that the way you look is not acceptable.
Yes, and that's why I think we label the diet voice. So that's, in eating disorder recovery, that's why we labeled it the eating disorder voice, because it is acknowledging that voice is separate from who you are as a person. So we like to do that with the diet voice because it's a similar thing. It's essentially the same, right? It's the same messaging. So,
and something that I would like to take a moment to share that, like, maybe other people feel the same way, is that growing up, I always recognized that the voice that I heard in my head was not who I am. It actually would say things to the point where I would be terrified that mind reading was real, and that someone would read my mind and, like, define me by what they heard in my mind, because I felt so disassociated from that voice. However, that voice ran my life because I didn't know how to tap into my intuition. So if anyone out there feels like you have two voices in your mind, one is, for me, growing until recently, the diet voice, or that devil voice. I always like to associate them as angels and devils in your mind. And, like, the angel is your intuition and it's your internal guidance system, and the devil is, like, that diet voice that's trying to send you down that destructive path. So, like, that voice might talk about diet culture. It might also talk about, other things in life that you feel disassociated from, because I've struggled a lot with, like, mental health, depression, and having suicidal thoughts, and that voice is all kind of together for me. It's all the same voice. It just has different attitudes depending on what's going on. So if anyone associates with that voice, this kind of lumps in that realm.
Yeah, and I remember, and I've mentioned this before too, I remember questioning a lot of things that the diet voice says and has said to me growing up. Like, things like, okay, so if we eat this, this way, then you're going to, you will look a certain way. And I remember trying to do it and it being so hard that I'm like, if this is so hard for me to do, am I really meant to do it? Maybe I'm just not meant to look that way. And I remember, and then the diet voice would come in like, no, you are, you're not worthy unless you're thin, like kind of it would come back at you. And so I think that was kind of like my intuition and my diet voice kind of battling a bit, because I think deep down I knew that behavior was unhealthy. And my intuition was creeping in, like, are you sure you want to do this? Like, so yeah, I don't know. Like, I think that's, I remember that experience though of kind of fighting between the two.
Yeah. And I feel like the trick to managing the diet voice ultimately, and we can talk about this later too, is that you want to recognize that the two are there and almost like adjust the levels of volume on both. Turn down the diet voice and turn up the intuition voice. But we can get more into that later in the episode.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, I don't know, for me, I think, like, I don't think the diet voice for me will ever go away.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of acceptance around that. And also acceptance around, sorry, my throat's dry. And also some acceptance around, the idea that we can overcome it. Like, even if it's not something that will ever go away.
Yeah.
That it can exist without us having to listen to it.
I think just like everything in this podcast, our goal is to help you listeners strive to get to that neutral point where you can hear it saying your body needs to look a certain way, and you can be like, oh, that's my diet voice. Oh, that's just Tom. Like, you can name it. You can,
you can. Some people do name it. Like I never named mine, but my therapist recommended naming it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's almost like I feel like we could name it Aunt Marge, because that's the character we use. but whether you name it or not, the diet voice, it's just recognizing that it's there without it affecting your mood or your decisions or that kind of thing, right? So,
and like everybody has a version of it, so it's totally normal.
Yes.
But yeah, you're definitely just, because now, like, in terms of comparing how far we've come, I used to, those diet thoughts would come, I would have no idea how to connect to my intuition, and they would all consume me. I would change the way I eat, I would throw everything away, I would go to the grocery store, I would make a new exercise regimen, I would do all these things, and then to change the way I looked, because I would give in to that voice and that peer pressure, essentially, because that's really what it is, to change the way I look, because my Aunt Marge says the way I look is not okay, and it is what it is. But now sometimes I get caught off guard, but a lot of times it'll say things and I'll laugh at it. Like, my diet voice will say, oh, I should be eating a salad instead of eating this juicy burger. And then I laugh at it and I say, well, this juicy burger is what lights me up and what I know my body needs. I need the iron right now, because, like,
yes, exactly.
I'm like low. So, like,
yeah, no. And I think that's true, and I think that's something that we should all strive to. And, like, I'm at that point too. It's like, it's okay if this is really hard for you at first, right? Like, because it was really hard to distinguish between the two.
Yes.
And I think a good way to know the difference is your intuition will have your body's, I guess, what your body needs and, like, your body's health kind of at the top priority, whereas the diet voice, its top priority will be being smaller and losing weight. So if you're like, wait, is that the diet voice? It's like, well, what was the objective of hearing that?
Yes.
What was the objective of that being said?
Yeah.
And if it's like to be smaller, then it's like, that's the diet voice, right?
Yeah.
Like, and usually what your intuition says will be counterintuitive to the diet voice.
Yes.
And to what society thinks too. Like, for example, I remember, I used to, go for a walk every day, and I couldn't miss a day. And I remember one day just being really tired, and my intuition was screaming at me like, maybe you just take this day off, because and the diet voice was like, no, like you have to walk every day, like, and I remember sitting down and being like, well, I like walking, but like it was kind of hard in that moment to distinguish between the two. Yeah. And then I realized that, like, well, why do I want to walk? Well, it's to not miss a day. Well, why do I want to not miss a day? Because I think that if I will miss a day, then, XYZ will happen to my body, and da-da-da-da-da. So it's might take a little bit of analysis. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm not good enough. I'm, if I miss a day, I'm going to gain weight, like, that kind of thing. Right. Yeah. And then so then I was able to get to the bottom of it. Mm-hmm. And then be like, okay, no, today I'm going to listen to my Today I'm going to listen to my intuition.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think...
Yes.
For me, the first step, if you, listener, feel like you don't know if you have this voice or not, the first step is starting to try to observe your thoughts.
Yes.
And then listen to what's happening in there. And if you find yourself spiraling or anything, once you recognize that that's what you're doing, as soon as it might take a while, but once you start to recognize what's happening in your mind, then you can start to disassociate from it. But first, it's all observing what's going on in there.
And your diet voice might look different if you're in a smaller body. I think we should mention that too, because it might not be focused on weight loss primarily, but I think it still exists, and it's still something that's going to be putting you down.
Absolutely. I can't eat this, going back to the burger. I can't eat this burger because maybe I'll gain weight. Like a thinner body might think that too.
Yeah, or maybe it's like, oh, well, you're too thin. You're too thin. You should, we need to look more like J-Lo, or we need to, you know what I mean? Like who's got curves, and you're, you know what I mean? And you can't wear those shorts because, it makes your legs look like toothpicks, and that's unattractive. Like, so it could be the opposite, but it could be, the idea is that it's trying to put you down for not being what society sees as beautiful, so I just wanted to give an example of how it could go the other way, because there could be listeners listening who are in very small bodies and who have body image issues because they want to gain weight and they can't. Yes. Right? So yeah.
Exactly.
And they struggle with loving their body that way. So
Yeah, it can come from all shapes and sizes, the diet voice.
All shapes and sizes, and we say diet voice, but it's essentially like you're saying the devil on your shoulder, right? Like, yeah.
But the thing is, too, is like the diet industry wants you to believe that your body is not okay the way it is, and that you need to change it. No matter what
which
you
way
look
it
like.
Is. Yeah, exactly. It's true, though. Exactly. Yeah. Why? To make money off of you. Literally.
100%. That's it.
Yeah.
Case in point.
That's all it is.
It's an industry. It's a billions of dollar. It might even be at trillions now. Industry.
Business, I know, industry. Yeah. With businesses. Yeah.
Yeah.
Weight Watchers is a business. Keto is a business. Like, I don't know what the other ones are. Atkins is a business. Like, they're businesses. And they have a CEO that makes like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yep.
Yeah. If not more, if not millions.
Yep.
So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, is deciphering what's real and what's not real. And that's where I wholeheartedly believe that your intuition knows what's best for you. And that's where recognizing the voices in your mind can help you disassociate from and make smarter choices for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And like, while the diet voice is coming from a more negative place, your intuition will always have your best interest at heart.
Always.
And I think that's, and I would like to say that it's why we should actually do a whole, I'm just saying this for the listeners, maybe next episode will be about our intuition. Oh,
that would be fun.
we do an or maybe not the next episode, but we can do an episode on intuition, because then it's like we've talked about the one voice, we can talk about the other voice.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea is like that. The idea is that it's where was I going with this? I interrupted my own thought with my own thought. ADHD is great, guys. I actually have ADHD. I'm not just saying that. But yeah, no, but with what I was going to say was our intuitive voice is actually wiser than us, if that makes sense. It knows things before we know it consciously, if that makes sense. Or at least that's what I believe based on my life experience.
Same.
That's why when even in other situations that have nothing to do with diet culture, it's like if you're in a creepy situation and you get a bad feeling and your intuition is like, get the F out of here, this is the bad situation, and like it's like you're gonna want to listen to that voice. And how do you know that's a bad situation when it might look perfectly fine on the surface? Like, I don't know, but it just knows, right? Like,
yeah, your intuition doesn't always make logical sense.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, so sometimes too, our intuition is also that voice where if we're in a sketchy situation, it gives us some indication of that before harm comes to us. So for example, and we might not even know that, right? Like we might feel completely normal. And then all of a sudden we get this gut feeling like, you need to get out of here.
Yeah.
And that's it. Yeah. So it's I guess the point that I'm trying to make that I said earlier, it's like, it helps us it's wiser than we are, right? It's wiser than us, for sure.
And it doesn't always make logical sense because it knows what's right for us, and what's right for us isn't always right for somebody else.
Yeah, and our logical brain might not be able to understand it.
Yes, so. Exactly. And something that I've done with my intuition and my body acceptance journey, and we can totally talk about this in an intuition podcast episode, but I use it to pick out clothing and to pick out outfits. So when I'm at the store and I can choose something that lights me up and that makes me excited, like for example, I'm wearing a white sweater today, and it has like my diet voice doesn't want me wearing white because white makes you look bigger. But it has a fun like heart detail and like this keyhole at the back, and like there's a ribbon at the top, and like it's adorable. And putting it on, I remember being at the store in the change room with our mutual friend. We were shopping together at Torrid. And I remember putting it on and being so excited about it. And then I put it on, and then my diet culture voice took over in the mirror. And I was like, oh no, I do look fat, blah, blah, blah. Like I can't wear this, blah, blah, blah. And then she reminded me, because we had been shopping. We were at Ricky's and we were shopping. And then we went to Torrid, and she was like, okay, but like, old you would have wore it like this, but new you wears it like this. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I like tucked it in the front, and
oh, that's nice.
Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah. And then it's like my favorite. I wear this sweater all the time now, like all the time. And so like recognizing the diet culture voice, and using your intuition to kind of like override it, definitely can help you make choices.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't do that with clothes, but I do that with food. Like in the form of, if I'm going to order something for dinner, I'm like, okay, what do I feel like eating? It's not like what I should eat. I don't look at like what I've eaten the rest of the week. I don't care about that. It's like, what do I want? What does my body want right now? And then sometimes you might not be able to know what you want, right? Like, the example is like, I knew I needed to eat before this podcast, but like, I couldn't think of anything that I wanted to eat, so I just ate rice.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you have to do that, and I did that because I know that I needed to nourish my body with food.
Yeah.
But I couldn't. But that can also be the diet voice too coming in, making you not be able to make up your mind. It could be almost like a subconscious like, well, you could just not eat anything and then you'd be thinner. Like, so.
That happened to me this morning.
That happens too.
This morning, I was like, I woke up early for some reason, and I woke up hungry, and I knew for sure, like, my stomach was making noises.
Yep.
I was hungry. And by the time I went upstairs and got some food, and then, no, sorry, when I was making coffee and stuff, and I was like, what am I going to eat? And then the voice said, well, you could not eat because not eating is what everybody else is doing, kind of thing, you know?
Right.
And then it just really made me think. I'm like, oh yeah, because that's what the diet voice would want you to do, and it would want you to do what everybody else is doing and not eat. And like, it's like praised in our society. Oh, look how intermittent fasting, like, look how long I went without eating. Like, oh, I'm such a saint. Like, such willpower I have.
It's
to ignore my intuition, just telling me I'm hungry.
Well, and that's sometimes that happens to me too, because I get doing something else, and then I forget. I lose track of time. That's a really common thing with people with ADHD. So this morning, before I sat down to make some bows because I make home decor stuff, I decided to can some jalapenos, and I got so into the canning, I'm like, oh yeah, I haven't eaten breakfast yet. And I had a similar thought of like, well, you could just skip breakfast. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to skip breakfast. Like, that's like, what actually triggered me being like, oh, I haven't had breakfast yet was I felt hungry.
Yeah.
So like the hunger came, and I'm like, oh, I'm hungry. Why am I hungry? Oh, because it's 10 a.m. and I've been up since 7 a.m. and I haven't had anything to eat yet.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm hungry. And it's like, so I stopped what I was doing. And this is really hard for me because I get focused on a task and I like to continue it until it's done.
Yeah.
I stopped what I was doing, canning the jalapenos. I made myself a bagel and I ate it, and then I went back to canning.
I think that's the thing to remember about the diet voice, is that it is counterintuitive. Like, both of us felt hungry, and then both of us were like, well, maybe I could not eat, because that's the diet culture voice.
That's the diet culture voice. And I didn't have like, because everyone, it was more like, well, if you don't eat, then maybe it'll work. It was almost like it was giving me another excuse. Like, oh, well, like, if you don't eat, you could continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, but like, eating is important.
Yeah.
So.
It comes in creepy ways. Yeah. The diet culture voice. Yeah. Just the same as in the media, how they like shift talking about body size.
Yeah.
They're shifting it. Our diet voice is shifting because it's trying to survive.
Yeah, instead of outright talking about it, they're tweaking it to make it more socially acceptable.
Yeah.
Because we are making some headway, I think, where where bigger bodies are being, or are being criticized as, exactly. So, so like, it would be insulting for someone to talk like they did in Hook, but like, so they just do it in these roundabout ways now, where they make little stabs and little jokes.
Yeah. It's true.
Like, so, but it's just, it's one of those, but it can still be triggering, right? So, but no, I think that's a great point about, that it can sneak up on you.
Yeah.
And make you think that you're doing it for a different reason that's not dieting. Yeah. But really, it's ultimately about that.
Yeah. And I think once you're able to remove yourself from like the spiral and like being all consumed by the thoughts, and you're able to like recognize it. So for myself this morning, I knew I was hungry, and then I had this thought, and then I was like, well, I need to listen to my body because my body is telling me it's hungry. And your body is telling you that not because your body isn't trying to quote unquote make you fat or make you unhealthy or like do anything. Your body is trying to survive. Your body is trying to keep you alive and live your life, and you're getting hunger pangs because you're hungry.
I think my thought pattern with the same thing was like, I'm hungry. And it was like, if I literally, I think, had the thought, if I ignore this hunger and don't eat, then I would be giving into, I think at the time in my head, I called it my eating disorder voice.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to do that. And then that's when I went and made the bagel. Yeah. So like, I knew what it was.
Yeah.
right? Like it was like, and not giving into it, even if I'm not in a place where I'm like listening to my body is the best thing. It's like if I can just be like, I'm not listening to you, voice.
Yeah.
Like F you.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
For sure.
So
yeah.
Yeah, so it's like it's one of those things, right, where you being able to identify the voice makes life so much easier.
Yeah.
And like we said earlier, if you can't get to a place where you can't get to a place where you do that, like where you're, able to do that, then I think that it's I'm losing my train of thought. Like, yeah, once you're able to observe everything, like you had said, you'll be able to get to a place where you can do that.
Yes.
But
it's like the first
and I
step.
And I wanted to mention this is a very good point for me, is when I'm overly tired, when I'm in a vulnerable position. So say something negative happened in my life, like someone passed away, or I got some bad news about something, that can make me more vulnerable to the died voice coming up. And I think that's true for a lot of people too. So because it's almost like your defenses are down because you're dealing with whatever you're dealing with. And so I think what helps me is I recognize, like, by recognizing how you're feeling, like, I feel tired. So just, okay, Morgan, so be aware that the diet voice could creep in a bit more today. And then that way you're already prepared for it, just in case it happens.
Yeah.
And you'll be ready to recognize it a little bit quicker.
Yes, absolutely. And then knowing that the end goal is loving, honoring, and respecting yourself might help you disassociate if you are lost in the thoughts and you don't know how to get out of them. I was absolutely there. I had a coach help me recognize what was going on in there, and that's how, like, I was able to disassociate from the thoughts, because I remember feeling like I had no choice, that my brain was on autopilot and that it was making these thoughts and that I was like a slave to these thoughts. So if any of you feel that way too, that is not the case. And
I felt like that in my life prior to.
You did?
For sure. That's a really good, before I started therapy, for sure. I felt, and I think that's a good point. We think we've just made another good point without making it, is that if you're struggling with this and you need help with this, it's okay to reach out to something like a coach or a therapist to help, to get help, because once you do, it can change your life. It can make your life a lot happier and, a lot more fun to not have to listen to this shitty voice anymore. So or like, it doesn't, like I said, it doesn't make it go away completely, but it you can learn how to manage it, right? Like and that's important, I think. I think
too, knowing that you're not alone, because like we've known each other for how long, and I had no idea that you had that same thing happening in your head as I had happening in my head.
That's one of the reasons I started therapy, because, like, to elaborate on it a little bit, it's like I think I said to my therapist when she was interviewing me before I had a session, I was like, I feel like if I don't do something, then I'm going to go back into my eating disorder behavior, because I feel like it's taking over. Like it's taking over, it's taking control. I don't know how to stop it. I don't know how to eliminate it, right? And that was when I started therapy, when I felt like I was out of control like that, right? So I did have that same feeling. And that's when I started it. I had it shortly. It was the same. It was very similar of like, why do these thoughts keep popping into my head? And like, but that's before I saw them as different. Right? I didn't see them as separate from my intuition before I started therapy. I didn't know that was how it was. So,
and for me, I didn't even think I had an intuition. Like, everyone talked about their intuition, and I was like, well, I don't know how to access it. I don't know if I even have one. Like, maybe I have something else going on. I don't know. But like, it's something that it took coaching and practice and like to really like what I said before, becoming the observer and like starting to recognize what's happening in there and know that you're not alone and know that it's normal and know that there is light at the end of the tunnel, that you can disassociate from the thoughts and they don't have to be all consuming and they don't have to control your life, and that you are in control and you can have control.
I think that's a big feeling. Out of control is a big thing.
Absolutely.
So that's how I felt for sure. But yeah, it's such a heavy topic for me, but it's I think it's really important to talk about it because you know, we all go through this, and I hope we've touched on too. I mean, we touched on some ways that we can work through it, but at the end of the day, like, I'm a huge advocate for therapy and a huge advocate for counseling, anything you need. Coaching really helps you because that's what you needed at the time. Like, it's like, you know, if your intuition is basic, like, it was almost like my intuition threw up its hands and was like, I need help. Like, it was like that type, like, I'm waving the white flag, like I don't know how to do this on my own. And that was, if you're at that point, then definitely get help. There's no shame in that, right? Like,
that's where it was for me. It was mindset coaching, because I felt like out of control and that I couldn't do it on my own, and that not everyone must be going through what I'm going through. And it helped me learn that, like, I'm not alone, and a lot of people feel the same way. And I hope that you listeners now, if you felt that way, you now know too that, like, you're not alone and it's normal, and like, you can get help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think that was good. I think we covered that topic really well, and I think we should do intuition too as well. At some point. We'll
add that to our list of upcoming topics, so get ready for that one.
Absolutely. And if you guys have an idea for a topic that we haven't approached, and you want to hear us talk about something related to body acceptance or diet culture or whatnot, like, feel free to reach out on social media and DM us. And like, we may or may not do it depending on how we feel like it aligns with the podcast, but we're always open to suggestions because we're doing this podcast for you, and we want to do things that you want to hear. So
absolutely. Hit us up.
All right. Exactly. All right. So I guess we will end it here, and we will get to see you in the next episode.
See you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Comment on social media to let us know what you think. You can find us on TikTok and Instagram at Body Acceptance Babes. Please join our Patreon for bonus content, behind the scenes access, and more.
If you or someone you love is struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating behavior, you can get help in Canada from the National Eating Disorder Information Centre toll free at 1-866-633-4220, or email nedic@uhn.ca. Or in the US, you can text or call the National Eating Disorder Association toll free at 1-800-931-2237.